Canada's onward migration has increased by 31%. Onward migration meaning people immigrating to a country, here Canada, and then leaving, not because of deportation, but voluntarily, because they chose to. And I know this sounds shocking at first, but let's take a closer look at the numbers. How many people is that actually? And also, where are all these people going to? And what other countries could possibly be better than beautiful Canada? So let's talk about this. And I'm not going to go into the details of why immigrants and also some Canadians are leaving Canada. For that, you can check out this video here. The 31% in onward migration originated from this study. The leaky bucket, which goal was to study how well Canada could retain immigrants. Shortly after this study was released, dozens of news stories broke out telling about Canada's disillusioned immigrants leaving Canada.
Canada may now have an issue retaining recent arrivals. More immigrants are moving away from Canada in recent years. And data from Statistics Canada shows 15% of immigrants leave Canada within 20 years of arriving.
This study analyzes data up to 2019 and found that there was a huge spike in onward migration in 2017 and 2019, bringing migration to a 20-year high. The 2019 onward migration rate is 31% higher than the historical average of 0.9%. So let's just step back a bit and see what this means. This means that before 2019, on average, onward migration was 0.9%, and in 2019, it increased by 31% to 1.18%. So not as dramatic as it initially seemed. Well, let's take that number of 0.9% average historical onward migration. This means that out of 1,000 people immigrating to Canada, about 9 people said, Canada is not for me after all, and ciao, leaves the country. And then the huge spike in 2019, increasing by 31% to 1.18%. So then out of every 1,000 people, instead of previously 9 people leaving Canada, now 12 people left Canada. If you look at it this way, it doesn't seem like a lot. Now let's compare these numbers of onward migration to the number of people immigrating so we get a better sense of the mass. But before we continue, if you're enjoying this video so far and you want to get more videos from me, then make sure that you're subscribed and turn notifications on. And also, if you want to support my channel, you can head down to the description section below and check out the affiliate links and see if any of them are of any use to you. For example, this laptop stand that I got from Amazon. To make these videos, I spend so much time on my laptop, so I need to ensure that the height is just perfect. You can find the link to this and many other products that I use in the descriptions. This chart shows the number of people who immigrated to Canada between 2000 and 2023. Between July 2019 and June 2020, 284,000 people immigrated to Canada. But note that this number does not line up perfectly with our previous 1.18% onward migration data set. Why don't they just include this number as comparison in the leaky bucket study so I don't have to mix and match stats that don't match 100%? I don't know why they don't do it. But anyways, it suffices for this calculation. Now, if onward migration in 2019 was 1.18%, it means roughly that out of the 284,000 immigrants to Canada, 3,353 people left Canada. Now, 3,300 people per se is not a huge number. After all, it seems natural that out of the hundreds of thousands of people who came to Canada, a few thousand here, changed their minds after seeing what's going on in Canada and just decided to leave again. And it's not like Canada is the only country experiencing onward migration. Germany, for example, in 2019 had 1.5 million immigrants. I know it's a lot, and it's largely because of the refugees coming in, but they also had 1.2 million people leaving Germany. And I know this is not an apple-to-apple comparison because Canada's onward migration number of 3,000 represents the people immigrating to Canada and then deciding to leave, whereas the Germany number includes all immigrants, including Germans. But what it shows is that there are other countries that people are eager to leave, immigrants are not. And to make this more comparable, let's take a look at the total number of immigrants from Canada, people leaving Canada, so including Canadians. In 2019-2020, there were 77,600 immigrants from Canada. So this number includes Canadians, so non-immigrants who also decided that they wanted to leave this country. If anything, this number is even more interesting. If we calculate this as a percentage of total population, that's 77,591 divided by 37.6 million population in 2019, or 0.2% of the population. For Germany, comparatively, that was 1,231,552 divided by a population of 83 million in the same year equals 1.48%, meaning that there was a higher percentage of people choosing to leave Germany that year than people deciding to leave Canada. But another, even more surprising statistic concerns citizenship applications. Another study found the citizenship rate among recent immigrants has decreased significantly, dropping from 75.4% in 1996 to 45.7% in 2021, a decline of 29.7 percentage points. So that's a 40% drop. Almost half of this decline occurred from 2016 to 2021, with approximately 40% of the most recent decrease possibly related to COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. However, even after accounting for the pandemic effect, the citizenship rate declined at a faster rate from 2016 to 2021 than during any other 5-year intercensual period since 1996. And of course, not everyone who moves to another country will then decide to stay there forever. There are a lot of expats who plan to only stay in Canada for a couple of years from the get-go. But a drop of 40% of permanent residents, so people who had already decided that they wanted to stay in Canada long-term, increasingly deciding not to get Canadian citizenship is shocking. For those of you who don't know about the PR process, the process of getting permanent residence here in Canada is actually the much more difficult one. But once you got your permanent residence here and you pass some very basic criteria, getting citizenship in Canada is the easier part. So it's not hard for permanent residents to get citizenship, and yet 40% fewer people are deciding to get it. But now let's get back to the 1.18%, the 3,300 something people immigrating to Canada and leaving again. How bad is this actually? And where are all of these people going? 3,300 is not that much in absolute terms. 1.18% is still tiny. The only problem is when that percentage keeps growing. If it goes from 1.8% to 3%, then 7% and 10% in the coming years and decades. That would not be a good thing. No, even if you're of the opinion that the number of immigration should be reduced, onward migration is not a good thing. But why? Because it just means that the product doesn't match the advertising. And that's just a waste of money and time for everyone. Because it costs the government money to attract those people to come to Canada and to process all of those applications. So if the government spends all of that money, tax money by the way, just for people to leave again, that's not great. If the Canadian government cannot provide the adequate infrastructure, housing especially, then that limitation should be reflected in the number of immigrants being accepted into the country in the first place, instead of letting Canada become a leaky bucket. Now let's get to that last intriguing question. Where do all these people go? Both the 3,300 something immigrants in 1990 and the 70,000 something Canadians. And it kills me that I just couldn't find any stats on the breakdown of the countries that people go to, at least nothing recent. But according to this research paper, onward emigration to the US by Canadian immigrants between 1995 and 2000 reached 48,336. I know it's not recent, but if we take what we have and divide this by 5 years, that's almost 9,700 per year. People who immigrated to Canada and then leaving for the US. And this other study also confirms similar. It says that in Canada, 37% of immigrants moved onward to the US. If this is true, that's a lot. Other people simply migrated to more affordable countries, like these two who moved to Portugal. Strictly speaking, onward migration means people immigrating to one country and then migrating to another country other than their home country. But in this study, onward migration is simply defined as immigrants leaving Canada. This means that a lot of immigrants are possibly leaving Canada just to return back to their home country. People from India going back to India, people from France going back to France, and so on. They thought that the grass was greener in Canada, but after a few years of living here, it seemed to them as though, all in all, things were still better in their home country, at least for them.